Brookes is a consultancy dealing mainly with marine and offshore. We've been established in the market for a long time, but in recent times we've expanded quite a lot and recruited highly qualified and experienced consultants to our 7 offices worldwide. So we now have a huge pool of expertise ranging from our master mariners to our engineers, our scientists, right the way through to our naval architects, loss adjusters and fire investigators. Those consultants based strategically around the world allow us to better meet the needs of our clients. They may come to us with a particular situation which requires the expertise from more than one discipline, and being located worldwide allows us to do that in a timely and cost-effective manner. I can only talk from a safe carriage of cargoes point of view, and in terms of what we deal with regularly, there are certain cargoes that continue to have potential risks when it comes to safety of the vessel and those on board. Liquefaction in cargoes remains a significant problem, as does self-heating or oxygen depleting cargoes, such as coal or agricultural products, which can give rise to potentially dangerous or even fatal situations on board a vessel. That's sort of the general day-to-day issues that we face. But talking more generally, everyone's aware of the tough market conditions for the shipping sector, but those have also had an impact in terms of the safe carriage of cargoes. The economics conditions, if you like, have forced different parties into markets that might be more risky than they would ordinarily choose to operate in, and it's caused people to be more creative in trying to keep their vessels trading. Aside from that, new markets, or take Iran as the most recent example, reopening an export market, they may have been out of action for a period of time, and during that time the regulations may change such that when they begin to export again, there can be a big difference in terms of their information that they provide for their cargoes versus what's required under the global regulatory environment. And freight rates as well, changing freight rates have had an impact in terms of it may suddenly become viable to transport a cargo by an alternative means than that party was doing so before. So for example, bulk carrier freight rates were so low that maybe something that was being shipped in containers now becomes viable to ship it in bulk. But that doesn't automatically mean that they can be safely carried in both methods of transport. There are different regulations for transporting containers versus bulk cargoes. All of those factors together, and also, all those factors together basically create an environment whereby we have vessels potentially carrying cargoes that they're not used to carrying or even carrying for the first time. We have exporters and shippers shipping cargoes that they haven't done in this manner, or they're doing for the first time after a period of time out of the market. And it potentially gives rise to situations where we have a distinct lack of information relating to the safe carriage of the cargo, or inappropriate or inaccurate information. And it also, obviously, in that situation, presents the potential for dangerous or even fatal conditions during a voyage. In that context, then we would always recommend that expert advice is sought as soon as possible. It may be that, okay, this master is loading a cargo, he's never loaded it before, he's not entirely sure if this is a problem or if it isn't a problem. So if we can very quickly tell or provide some advice in terms of whether this is an issue or not, what we should be looking for. And for more complicated situations, then that's where we really, I think, add value as a company in terms of providing or applying our expertise to that situation to provide the best or the most reasonable resolution. In terms of incentives, it's very difficult depending on the situation. Obviously, ideally everyone would be working towards a safe carriage of cargoes, but whether or not that's a reality depends on the situation. If you take liquefaction as an example, then obviously the ship owners have the highest incentive, because basically the lives of their crew could be at stake, and that very quickly sharpens the focus. But in the same situation, other parties may not consider the masters' concerns to be a real problem. They've been doing it this way for years, they've never had an issue, all the usual arguments. So it's very difficult to say in reality whether those incentives are met. In terms of regulation, yes, there's a lot of regulation out there already for the acceptable safe carriage of cargoes. But my own view is that the human element means that there's always a risk of something happening, and that's why we still have incidents today. There are certain things that, if we take ship owners for example, best practice protocols can be put in place that minimize that risk, minimize the risk of human error during loading, supervising loading, or you could take even further steps in appointing, say, an independent cargo superintendent. They would supervise the loading. They're perhaps more familiar with the cargo than the crew may be, and so there's ways around to minimize the risk, but whether you can remove the risk, I'm not so sure. I think the IMO and the other safety committees continually review the situation, so we can expect more regulation. Whether that comes at the right time or quickly enough is a different question. But in terms of self-regulation, unfortunately, it tends to take, it's very slow and forthcoming. It tends to take very drastic incidents to focus the industry as a whole. If you take liquefaction as the example, it's very unfortunate that it requires such a tragic, significant loss of life in order to get everybody deciding that, okay, this is a problem and we need to start planning some measures for that. It's very difficult to say whether you can ever have an environment where that risk will be removed. I'm not sure we ever will, but we have to just review every incident that happens as an industry, and I think there are sufficient panels and committees for that to happen.